Now, in this video, we want to discuss the topic of redundancy. Redundancy can be a wonderful thing if we're thinking about engineering. For example, in an automobile, we would want to have seat belts and airbags and maybe crumple zones in the car to protect us in the event of an accident. So redundancy can be helpful from an engineering perspective, especially in terms of extra safety. But when we're thinking about formatting, we don't want redundancy. In fact, if we're repeating different elements in a financial model, it may make the model look too cluttered or busy. In fact, one of the expressions that we can keep in mind when we're formatting is that if we can remove something, we should. Now, before we start applying this concept of redundancy, let's make sure that we can just see the headings that are on this financial model. We're just going to select across quickly and use a great native Excel shortcut, Control B, to make these headings bold. So here's one area of redundancy. You can see here we're marking US dollars, but we also have a dollar sign in the number formats. Both are not needed. Which one should we remove? Likely these dollar signs, since they're repeated across in each one of the periods in the financial model. Now, please don't do this on your computer. Just watch for a moment. So we're going to pop into this cell and hit Control-1 to get into the format and pop over here and just delete out the number sign and hit Enter, just like that. And now what we're going to do is select all of these numbers down to the bottom and tap F4 to repeat that last command. So the income statement already looks better than the cash flow statement and the balance sheet, but let's take things a step further. Notice how much we're repeating units down this units column. This would be fine if the units were changing for each row, but in fact the units appear to be the same across all three of these financial statements. So what we can do in this case is put in a global units marker right up here. All figures in USD thousands. Just like that. This is going to enable us now to delete a lot of repetition from our model. All the way down here, we can delete all of these units. Now the income statement already looks quite a bit better, but let's focus on the number formats. There are really three aspects to these number formats, which are common in financial modeling and we'd like to change. We'd like them to be right aligned. We would also like the negatives marked with brackets instead of a minus sign or a red font. And what we also want to do is we want to have our zeros indicated just as dashes to make the model look really clean. All we need to do with Macabacus is hit Control-Shift-1, which is the general number format. And all three of those things have been done for us. We'll see the dashes for the zeros in a moment when we get to the cash flow statement and the balance sheet. So now let's pop up to the headings and get them aligned. Horizontal alignment cycle, Control-Shift-H can do that for us in one shot. So let's go over to the global units marker. We're just going to hit Control-B since we don't really need that to be in bold and do a copy, paste it for the cash flow statement and paste it for the balance sheet. Now let's do some quick cleanup. We can take these unit markers here away, select all of these numbers all the way down the balance sheet, Control-Shift-1 to put them into the correct format. Up to the headings now, Control-Shift-H for horizontal alignment. Over to the cash flow statement, we want to delete some of these units, Control-Shift-1 right here for general number format, and to the top, Control-Shift-H, and we're all set. Now those keyboard shortcuts from Macabacus made things so fast, but really the key takeaway from this discussion is that when we're thinking in terms of formatting, we want to remove redundancy. Remember, if we can remove something, we should. For now, let's jump ahead into the next video. We'll see you there. So let's use some borders here to make some line items really stand out. When we think about the income statement, we're often focused on the bottom line. So we'll want net income to really stand out prominently on this financial model. With the cash flow statement, we're obviously interested in cash flows. In particular, we might want to highlight the ending cash balance. Finally, for the balance sheet, we're probably focused on total liabilities and equity to make sure that that matches up here with the total assets. Now, before we get started, let's practice some keyboard shortcuts quickly. We know that Control-Shift-7 does an outside border. Remember that Macabacus works with cycles. So Control-Shift-7 once, here, twice, and then 3 times will produce 3 different outside borders for us. And also remember another handy shortcut for no border. We highlight up, Control-Shift-, and the borders are all removed. Now those shortcuts should be review at this point, but in this video we want to make use of top borders, bottom borders, left and right borders. So we're going to use a slightly different shortcut. So we're going to use Control-Alt-Shift and then the appropriate arrow. So for a top border here, we would do Control-Alt-Shift up. Here, twice, 3 times, and we get 3 different borders, just like before with a cycle. So let's quickly remove these here with Control-Shift-, just to clean things up. So let's put these shortcuts to use. Straight down here to the bottom line. We want to highlight across, Control-Alt-Shift up twice and down 3 times. Here we want to go up once here, and we're going to continue up the income statement until we get all the way to the top. Perfect. Now, some people like to take the borders from here and extend them all the way across and include the labels, just as we've done in this example. But here at CFI, we prefer not to do that. Really what we want to do is we want to separate parts of the financial model. So for instance, this part here is where the figures are. Over here, we're going to have a units column, and here is where we're putting our labels. So there's really no hard and fast rule for this. It's really a personal preference. For us, we like to make the model look less cluttered and less busy. So we can highlight across just like this and all the way down to the bottom, Control-Shift-, to remove those borders. Now, before we leave the income statement, remember that the main point was the bottom line. So let's pop down here and use a quick Control-B just to make this bold. Now, let's jump ahead into the next video. We're not only going to complete the cash flow statement and the balance sheet, but we want to have a little discussion. We want to explain why we inserted top borders here instead of bottom borders here for the cost of goods sold. Let's jump into the next video and talk about it. Now, you may think it's a little bit silly to have a discussion on top borders versus bottom borders because they really look the same. And in fact, in terms of keyboard shortcuts, it takes an equal amount of time to create either a top border or a bottom border, but there's actually a very good reason why top borders are better. They can save you time further down the road as you're building financial models. So the first thing that we can do is head down to this section where we're showing EBITDA. We're going to select these cells and hit Control-Shift- to remove the borders. Now let's install a bottom border. So we're going to go to the other line here, highlight across, Control-Alt-Shift down, and we have a bottom border in place. Now it's really helpful in financial modeling to be able to quickly insert rows or columns. You could use some old native Excel shortcuts, Alt-IR for insert row, Alt-IC for insert column. Now these are super easy to remember. What could be better? IR for insert row and IC for insert column. The problem is they're a little bit of a stretch on the keyboard. Macabacus has some better shortcuts that we can use here. Now it's really common in financial modeling to need to insert a row. And that's why this next shortcut from Macabacus is one of the most popular keyboard shortcuts used in the software. So let's pop down to the EBITDA line here and insert a row. So what we're going to do here is Alt-Shift-Insert and then Alt-Shift-Delete to insert and delete a row really quickly. So if we wanted to insert a column, we add the Control key in. So Control-Alt-Shift-Insert and Control-Alt-Shift-Delete. Super fast. So pretend we just need to insert a new line above the EBITDA line. So Alt-Shift-Insert gets that done, but we can see already the problem with the bottom border. If we copy this label down, we now have 2 borders there to deal with. So let's quickly just delete out this row. So Alt-Shift-Delete gets rid of it. We can scoot over here, highlight these cells, Control-Shift- to remove the border, and now let's put a top border in place, which is Control-Alt-Shift up arrow. Now let's see how well the top border works. We're going to insert a row. So Alt Shift Insert, and we have a new row there. We can copy this other item down and everything works perfectly. So let's quickly scoot down to here and just a quick Alt Shift Delete to delete this row out. And I think you can see from this demonstration why it's generally a better practice to use top borders instead of bottom borders. So let's apply some of this nice formatting with the borders across over here to the cash flow statement. We can highlight across, Control Alt Shift up to put in a top border here, another top border here, and then for the bottom ending cash balance, we can highlight across, Control Alt Shift up twice, and then down 3 times, just like that. So remember that we want the ending cash balance to stand out. So let's highlight it and make it bold, and then head up on the balance sheet to Assets and also make that bold as well. So you probably know these keyboard shortcuts by now. So let's get this balance sheet finished up over here by putting some borders in place for the total assets. We want a nice border here for the liabilities, shareholders' equity, and finally, total liabilities and equity here, which we can also make bold. Perfect. Hopefully you're starting to get comfortable with some of these keyboard shortcuts. Remember, the first step is to commit them to memory. Eventually, they get into muscle memory, and then your fingers will just know exactly where to go on the keyboard. Let's hop into the next video, and we're going to talk about the auto color function, which is an absolute game changer in Macabacus. We'll see you there.